first of all, I have to remind the topic of this session. The topic of this session is about learning innovation, how learning in peer-to-peer distributed networks can accelerate change. And I will remind the ground rules, which are when we start, we'll ask everybody, every attendee to type the city, city and country he's from, connecting from in the chat window. And we'll ask them to actively participate by listening and asking questions in the chat. The recommendation is to ask everybody not to ask to share audio and video unless you are invited by speakers to join the panel, because doing so you will disrupt the session and cause problems to speakers. Okay, how the session will work? I think that we'll listen to the speaker, and after that we'll have a Q&A. And after we'll share links to have resources for this session. Okay, so now I think that it is time to hear from the speaker. I'm talking about the Professor Karin Watching from University of Georgia. Professor, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning. Let me add my welcome to this session, Learning Innovations, how learning peer-to-peer in networks can accelerate change. I'm Laura Lee Sandman, a professor emerita from the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, the United States, and part of an evaluation team that studied the EACH session, a learning innovation of the Teach to Reach Scholar program. Traditionally, training has been designed to meet certain goals that are determined by an organization or a trainer. But learning for change calls on us to rethink training toward creating new learning and skills that are identified by the learner. So in this session, we will explore the learning designs that undergird the Scholar programs and the implications for change of learning in your context. So leading our discussion on leading innovations is Dr. Karen Watkins, professor in the Department of Lifelong Education, Administration and Policy at the University of Georgia. Karen is a distinguished scholar specializing in human resource development and adult education, whose work is highly regarded in the scholarly communities throughout the world. She's recognized for providing research-based set of theories and practices that have influenced how human resource development professionals think and study learning in organizations. Some of her areas of scholarly expertise, research, writing, and teaching include learning organizations, action learning, workplace learning, informal learning, incidental learning, and facilitating learning. With her longtime scholar collaborator, Victoria Marsick, they have grown deeply two areas in HRD, informal workplace learning and assessing the learning culture through dimensions of the Learning Organization Questionnaire, the DLOQ that you may become familiar with at some point. She has the distinction of being inducted into two Hall of Fames, the International Adult and Continuing Education Hall of Fame, as well as the HRD Scholar Hall of Fame. So Dr. Watkins' authentic learning innovations that she will describe in her UGA graduate level courses, as well, let me add, in the instruction of her new adorable puppy. So we encourage your participation, sharing your experience, raising questions, as was mentioned in the chat room, which my fellow evaluation team members, Cody Daly and Beiji Lee and Sung-Young Yang and I will monitor and then highlight back to Dr. Watkins to answer toward the end of the session. So Karen, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try to put it on. Okay, can you see anything right now? No.
No, no. I think that it is working.
Okay, there it is. Now can you
Yeah,
see?
it's okay
Okay.
now.
All right,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, it doesn't allow me to do what I was hoping to do. Well, I've been working with Retta Sadke and on the board of the Geneva Learning Foundation for a number of years now. And in that time, I've seen an evolution of his thinking and my own in terms of how to create the kinds of learning initiatives, learning and development initiatives that can actually lead to change in organizations. And I think that so one of the things I've challenged myself with as part of our evaluation this year is to try to capture and explain the learning design principles that undergird this work that many of you have been part of, and as a way to begin to kind of codify what are we learning from the Geneva Learning Foundation and particularly from the Scholar platform. So the Teach to Reach is a really important part of the whole program because it gets at the training that can create kind of an infrastructure, a network infrastructure that will allow change to happen at the organizational level. Teach to Reach was a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation initiative. And in the conferences in both 2015 and 2016, the foundation challenged people in the WHO network to use networks to deliver training, use more digital learning, and then in 2016 to integrate that digital e-learning, and to share these lessons learned at country levels. And certainly the conference that you're part of right now is doing exactly that. And of course, we're all doing digital learning because that's how we provide learning these days in the time of a pandemic. But also, one of the things they said in 2015 that really resonates with me, of course, because of my interest in informal and incidental learning, is that they want to encourage increased use of non-classroom learning. So the Geneva Learning Foundation really was designed to reinvent learning in a digital age. And the idea of the foundation was that we need to learn to connect more with peers and across country borders, function borders, role scope borders, and that similarly through the connections that we make, we learn. And all of that, if we've done it well, will lead to action. And this is where I think you'll see that there's real innovation in the work of the Geneva Learning Foundation, that they are working at scale to deliver digital learning, and they're focused on what difference it might make in the healthcare of all of those participating. So as I think about the design for learning, behind the scenes, if you will, is that the learning network is the core, that you create the learning network. 25,000 people now from 95 countries have been part of this network. And as each person takes a course, they become part of the network. And the network then becomes the source of a number of things. The network can help us lead and take action to solve problems, but it can also help us decide where to go next. So many times the people have been asked, what are the greatest challenges that you have that we might be able to solve through learning and development? And so this kind of crowdsourcing of where to go next allows the Geneva Learning Foundation to create digital courses that really build the new knowledge people need, that people are asking for. One of the other things that each digital course does is they use peer inquiry. But people produce some kind of an action plan and they implement it. So so to get to action, you need to first create the knowledge, and then you have to use it. So the network becomes the source of support. Really, they're coaching and prodding each other, celebrating successes in order to address those challenges. And then the other thing that is so powerful about the network that they're creating is that the network, because of these action plans, ends up with a massive database of solutions and ideas that can themselves become a kind of a collective force for continuous improvement of immunization globally. And of course, equally propagating local approaches that are informed by ideas from around the globe. So this sort of local global combination, I think, in the network is very, very powerful. So for an example of how this might work, here's an example of a challenge that someone submitted. And Laura Lee, do you want to?
Do you want Laura Lee to speak?
Yes. So this is the case of both access and utilization. So the data review showed that several health facilities indicated that there were access and utilization problems. And you can see how they indicated these particular problems, both the access and the utilization. So then what would be a training goal that would address that particular, these challenges? So part of the goals were to both train and guide supervisors to comprehend the techniques to identify the issues and walk them through the potential solutions in collaboration with Ministry of Health supervisors, and they would devise the strategies together to support poor performing health facilities. So our question to you in considering this case, both the problem and the goals, would be, what would be some training strategies you would suggest to meet this challenge? So if you could put some of your ideas in the chat area, building again on just the beginning sentiment of what Dr. Watkins was talking about in terms of possible development of networks, utilization of that network, and so forth. So one of the comments, Karen, was the challenge about really harnessing this crowd sourcing. So you may have some comments about how you might get, for example, in this particular case, how do you get people, these Ministry of Health and supervisors working together and building a network to develop with the health facilities training.
Thank you.
So there's also input on how does the root cause analysis of the problem in order to identify the appropriate solutions, right? How do you integrate successful digital e-learning in remote areas, which would be a potential learning strategy here. Another person added, particularly focused on the problems that they can solve at their own level.
These are great ideas and great questions, Sambo. The dilemma of using e-learning in remote areas is very difficult.
And one of the strategies can be to work on SMS notification processes for parents who forget the immunization schedules.
That's a great one. That is a great one. Using phones when sometimes computers are difficult to access. So I have a funny feeling that some of the digital e-learning in remote areas might have to shift to using the telephone, although the PC is more stable. It's nevertheless possibility. So those are great ideas. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so this is an example of the kinds of things that I'm sure you experience, and that people in the Geneva Learning Foundation have encountered frequently. And so what I think is interesting is if you think about even the comments that you're suggesting here. I like short videos. I like the SMS notification idea for parents, but you'll notice that there's a diversity of responses, right? That we don't just hold a training and session and tell people that you need to get people to come to the sessions and you need to do it in these 3 ways. Instead, we find different ways of reaching the parent, doing things in collaboration with the supervisors and so on. And so this is what we have observed that we think is very powerful in the Geneva Learning Foundation, that they blend informal and formal learning to create a more impactful learning, more impactful in the sense that it actually leads to something that we can use. And so they use formal learning strategies such as content modules, the Scholar platform, weekly check-ins in the courses, rubrics, so that you can measure and evaluate the projects that people develop that peers can actually use to give peer feedback. Of course, the case studies such as the one you just looked at, and also using learning analytics to drive intervention and content so that they can look at where people are struggling and focus content more impactfully. But they've also used a lot of informal learning strategies. Some of you may be familiar with the Harvard randomized coffee trials that they do virtually. Of course, the peer critique is an informal strategy. Action planning itself is. There's a lot of content that is developed by learners that they share.
Professor?
Yes?
Yeah. The whole session is 45 minutes, and there are enough questions for participants as the communication is really interesting for attendees. So I mean that if we finish at right time, maybe we'll have time to discuss.
Exactly. Yes.
Sorry for disturbing you.
Yes. So what is informal learning? Informal learning is any learning that is outside of formally structured classroom-based activities. It's often non-routine. And what that means is that it's less predictable. So we don't always know what you're going to learn in advance when we use informal learning. But it takes into account the needs of the learner. So it is much more likely to be shaped by the learner and relevant because the learner chooses it. And incidental learning is learning that happens as a byproduct of other activities. And that kind of learning is some of the most interesting learning, but also the most difficult to capture. There are 3 types of informal learning that Burson and Associates talk about. The learning that just happens on demand, that we just have, you have training modules that you make available to people all of the time. There's learning that is embedded in, this would be standard operating procedures that are available at any time at the touch of a button that we keep on a computer, for instance. And learning that is social, so that we work with each other in groups, we work with peers in these courses. Many, many examples of types of social social networks, coaching kinds of interventions. Burson talks about a learning architecture that what we need to build in order to enhance training is a structure that includes both formal and informal learning, and informal learning that spans all of these different types of learning. So, and I suggest that is actually what the Geneva Learning Foundation has been doing. Someone in the chat asked, is it more effective? Informal learning is highly effective for open-ended challenges or problems. And formal learning is best when you have, you can prescribe something. So you have a particular way of handling the COVID vaccine. Well, I can, there's a very specific way I need to do that. I can set an objective. I can design a training program or a video, and I can be very clear about that. But when I have a more open-ended problem, how do I deal with vaccine hesitancy in rural communities? This is a problem that is both widespread and terribly unique to each community. So I need a much more open-ended solution to that. The types of informal learning that are most effective for acquiring new knowledge is hands-on exploration of tools and collaborating with other people. Notice that this is, again, I'm actually doing something. So this is in the Geneva Learning Foundation, it's building the action plan and then implementing it. And then I learn from doing that. I also learn when I get help from someone else, when I work collaboratively, practicing on the job in real situations, so trying out some of these solutions. Or in the ITCH program, what we found very powerful was that people saw a way of delivering training that was different. And through the modeling of the Geneva Learning Foundation, they saw something they themselves could implement and improve their training. So ultimately, the model that I see is that the learning context that is created here is digital. It deals with the challenges facing immunization workers throughout the globe. The network itself is a global network, and particularly the design here is focused on impact. So the outcomes are foregrounded in the way in which this work is done. Secondly, the system that is in place looks at building the capacity of the system. And one way to build capacity is to change the skills of those who deliver the training. So their knowledge of best practice, their ability to continuously improve and to be learning leaders in their own setting builds an inherent learning and development capacity that is throughout the network. This is really the power of Teach to Reach and the network of learning leaders. And then within courses and programs that are offered, the learning goals and process has to be relevant and accessible, learner-driven. So the focus is very often on these more open-ended learning designs, even though some of the coursework might have some very specific objectives and outcomes. At least part of the course is often this more adaptable, flexible approach that allows us to have a broader range of learning outcomes. And with that broader range of learning outcomes, we get new skills that enable us to enhance the public health goals and reach our system outcomes of improving immunization coverage throughout. So the theory of change, as I understand it, is that really you create the network. The network is everything. And with it, you deliver the services through a digital context, through the platform and tools. He's always updating the tools to make it as advanced as it can be. So you train the trainers. You generate ideas to create knowledge. The courses themselves create knowledge. And another critical element of the theory of change is that there's post-course follow-up and monitoring that encourages people to be successful. And that the Impact Accelerator is a really critical feature of what allows the work that the Geneva Learning Foundation does to lead to a truly enhanced capacity across the network. I've written that what I see here is really a kind of an up and downstream scaffolding of learning, that there's a human knowledge network. So it's not just a digital network, but it's a human knowledge network that people are encouraged to mentor each other, to serve as accompanists in the courses, to be part of a peer network or a country team, led by EPI, to do mentoring and coaching and consulting with one another. A tremendous effort is made to scaffold, or in other words, to support the connections that create this human knowledge network. And through that, you enhance the learning culture of the systems. So I think I'm actually going to stop there and invite questions.
Okay, thank you, Professor. What we can see, most of them are appreciating the presentation and the experience you are sharing. And maybe there are some questions. I'll try to read them. I think that Adriana Alminana said that that is a contribution. I think it said that it is important to orient health workers on how to do root cause analysis of the problem in order to identify appropriate solution. Also, Sambo Isaku said that how do you integrate successful digital e-learning to remote area? Sohini said that if time permits, can you share an example of incidental learning? And Adriana said that are there any good examples we have of a peer-to-peer distributed network that exists within a country itself, run by the Ministry of Health? I think that that are the questions. Most of the observations are comments appreciating what you have shared.
Thank you very much. Well, let me start with a couple that I can address somewhat quickly. An example of incidental learning. If you think about the plenary session that you attend, one of the things that happens is, that we all learn whatever it is the speaker, wants us to, whatever they focused on. But if you, but perhaps somebody asks a question that sparks a new idea that you hadn't really thought about. And all of a sudden, even though that was not the purpose of the session, it becomes a powerful learning for you, because you now can pursue and follow the idea that was prompted by the question that somebody raised. So it would be a kind of an immediate example of incidental learning. So it's really just the other kind of incidental learning that I do all the time is, when I'm trying to research something and I'm doing an internet search, I go down all these rabbit trails that things that pop up and interest me. Well, these were not. I didn't set a goal to do that learning, but it became available to me, and so I pursue it. So I think incidental learning tends to be like that. It isn't, you don't set a goal and go out and do it as you do in informal learning, but you do learn. We learn all the time accidentally, right? We learn because we are in the right place at the right time, or and so on. So incidental learning is just ubiquitous. But what is critical is you have to reflect and recognize that it's learning. We interview people all the time who say, I don't think of that as learning because it didn't happen in a classroom. So incidental learning requires us to sort of reflect to make sure that we, that we can see it. Ian Steed asks if we can spell out how informal and incidental learning is different from the cascade training model. Well, typically any formal training is goal directed, right? We have a set of goals that we want to accomplish. And in a cascade model, you're passing the, at least as I understand it, you design a training, you deliver it to some people, then those people go out and deliver it to the people in their network, and then those people go out and deliver it to their network. And like the telephone game that children talk about, you have the possibility of it getting weaker and weaker because the people that designed the training understood it most clearly, right? And so each time you have the possibility that people understand it less and less. So that's still a very formal training model. And informal and incidental learning, what is critical is that the learner has more autonomy. So I choose what I'm going to work on. So when we create these challenge processes where people bring a challenge they want to look at, that is not, I didn't design what the challenge would be. The person the trainer comes in with that challenge and says, this is what I'm worried about right now. This is what I need to work on. And so I think that's a huge difference. And so then the trainer becomes the facilitator. The peers and the trainer work to help the person solve that problem. So I think that's quite different. Informal and incidental learning, I think, is used a lot at the local level as people work one-on-one with community leaders and try to get them to understand why we need to immunize children and so on. So I think a lot of that sort of one-on-one or small group discussion is occurring all of the time in field settings, but typically in training, we haven't really tried to understand informal learning. And I think the second thing is we haven't tried to understand how to make it more effective. There are ways to do it. So when you go into something like the ITCH session that Geneva Learning Foundation held, there's a guideline. There are rules about what facilitators should focus on, or that people can't give advice, they need to share experiences, for example. So knowing how to do informal learning more effectively guarantees stronger outcomes. All right, so I hope that answered your question, Ian.
Yeah, I think that you have answered to this question. Even I didn't have shared it. Isaku asked that are there evidence of greater effectiveness of informal learning as compared to formal learning?
Yes. Yeah, and I think I did speak to that earlier. That again, when I have a specific goal and I'm trying to teach people guidelines or something, then I think formal learning is very effective, right? But it's when I have a challenge that is perhaps unique to my situation, that it's more important to have a more open-ended kind of learner-controlled informal learning. So then I think informal learning is much more effective than, we can't possibly create a training program for all of the challenges that people have. I reviewed almost 300 of them that were submitted for the level 2 certification for Teach to Reach. And looking across those challenges, you had somebody worried about how are we going to roll out the COVID vaccine strategy to 300,000 people, health workers in one country, to people at a micro level. There's a culture in one of the communities that we work with where people feel that the old ways are better, and the old ways would be to expose people to diseases and let them build up their own immunity, that kind of thing. So that range of problems is really hard to design training around. And instead, I think what we need is again more open-ended. Thanks.
Okay, This one is a comment from Idao, who said that for utilization, community should be organized to actively demand for the service. I think it is not a question, but it is a comment. And
yes,
yeah, I wanted to read that.
yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, there are enough comments appreciating the experience you share. I think that I don't know if it is finished. If it is finished, we can read comments. If not, it is important to deliver the content of the because it is really important to hear from this experience. It is really important for me.
If you'd like, I could. There's a couple more slides that I could share.
Yeah, I think it is important to share it.
Okay. So I talked about this notion that there was kind of a systems model in the way in which learning development occurs with the Geneva Learning Foundation that is designed around building capacity. So how do we build capacity of the whole system, the immunization system? And I suggested that we do that through building a network and getting that network to have enhance skill and capacity to generate ideas, create knowledge, and create follow-up, do follow-up, so that we actually know that the capacity has been different. So another thing that we talk about is how do you measure this? How do you really measure informal and incidental learning? And typically, formal training has been measured by looking at satisfaction. Did people enjoy the session? Sometimes we look at learning. Did people do well on an assessment at the end of the course, that kind of thing? But very rarely do we look at the real outcomes. And the thing that's different, in the workplace, unlike in a classroom, in the workplace, there's some kind of organizational outcome that led you to offer the training in the first place. There's something you want to have happen, or that who wants to have happen, the Ministry of Health wants to have happen, that is the real desired outcome. And so one of the things that is, I think, very unique in the Geneva Learning Foundation approach is that it is that kind of outcome driven. They're really interested in how can we design learning that creates the kind of impact that that results in actual changes in the organization. And to get there, I've got to change the behavior of the people in the room. They have to learn something, but they have to. I can learn something and then never be able to use it. So our metric is use. So to really understand learning impact, we need to understand use. And the framework that we used to measure that in the one of the first evaluations that I did is based on theory. So, and this is a theory of change that argues that that to understand real impact, there are people go through levels of behavior where they go from not really being interested in making a change in any way to actually really integrating the change and making it part of how they and perhaps even their country operate. So we're interested in tapping into where along the spectrum are people after they complete one or more courses in the Scholar platform. And what we found, of course, is that people were much higher than you might anticipate in terms of utilization after they had done, particularly if they completed and did the action plans. So several things that you can think about here. One is that there is theory that is driving what we measure and how we understand impact. And of course, things also happen, I think, spontaneously. One of the things that I thought was very exciting in the Impact Accelerator was the spontaneous emergence of country level groups. And you know, in the approach that the Geneva Learning Foundation uses, the learners that become leaders and facilitators themselves. And I think that's a powerful thing. So Robert Keegan at Harvard said that if I talk to you, it's one point of light. But if we all talk to each other, if we turn and talk to your neighbor, you get many points of light or many points of insight. And so the peer facilitation, the sort of design where people voluntarily help each other, you know, the fact that this actually has led groups of people at the country level to come together, scholars creating their own country groups. It ended up at the end of the process in the Impact Accelerator that 55 countries, out of 55 countries rather, 24 actually had a country level group. So I think that was a really kind of an important piece. And ultimately, I think when you do all of these things, you create a learning culture. The organization, the system that you're part of is strengthened. And it's, you know, you go way beyond training to changing, you know, our emphasis on learning. So how we care about learning is likely to change considerably. When we did this assessment 3 years ago, one of the things we found was that overall, the organizations tended to be a little bit low on continuous learning. I suspect it would be higher now because we have been doing this work. All right, so what I've tried to communicate, I think, is that collectively, each of these experiences come together to create, you know, a totality that is more than an individual course. It's more than the training session that you attend, and it, you know, you're part of a network that is focused on learning and creating opportunities for more and more people to be able to learn together. So, and I like the example, by the way, of the pairing that is in the chat. It is a great way to do informal learning. Thank you so much for being here. And if there are any final questions, I think we have 5 minutes. So.
No, I think that, Professor?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that it is 45 minutes. But we can go over. We maybe have 10 or 15 minutes to finish.
I think we have 4 minutes.
Yeah, but we can go over. We can go over.
Okay.
Yeah. So I suggest you finish the presentation.
I did.
And
yes.
And after we can discuss.
All right. I did.
Karen, there was a question from Ian that I'd be interested in you exploring a little bit about. Are there sectors which are really leaders in informal learning approach, like educational sectors or healthcare sectors, or I was thinking about executive coaching where they really draw from, you know, just as our facilitators and so forth. But I'd like to hear you, based on your research, what you're seeing in other sectors.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I think...
Professor?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that the suggestion was to finish the presentation, and there are some questions. If you finish, and we know that after the Q&A, it is finished for the session.
And yes, and I have finished the presentation.
Yeah, this is a suggestion.
Yes, yes, and I did finish presenting, but thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Yes. You know, I think that executive training is a really good example of people that are they use a lot of action learning. They use coaching and mentoring. So they're using a lot of informal learning strategies. You know, higher education, not so much. Nonprofits, some, not as many perhaps as we might like. So I can't think of a sector that is, you know, stronger than most. Maybe high technology, because high tech is so digitally focused that they are doing it, you know. But yes, Sohini, I agree. Executive coaching has been very good. As the learner sets the goal, it's a great example of informal learning at its best, I think. So.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, Professor.
Yes.
Do you want me to read the questions?
If there's another question that I haven't addressed, I can only see a few things in the chat.
Yes, Adriana said that, well said, there can also be a prevailing culture of informal training as the way to do things. When informal strategy could produce different, he said that possibly better results to dynamic challenges that the immunization program face. And also, he said that I think that one of the challenges the immunization sector face is that many of the challenges are addressed through formal training approaches, whereas in fact the challenges require informal learning. And what can we learn from other sectors who moved from a resilience on formal training to more informal training approaches? I think that Lori is asked to precise the sector he see as leader in informal approaches, and he said that he wanted you to share if you have some experiences. So you need ask. I think that you answered to this question, Professor. I had seen a new employer shadowing a season one in other sector. I worked in, and I felt that that was an excellent use of informal learning. Some peers would go about it in a very formal way, but many peers just show the work and talk, ask questions to each other. And
that is an excellent example.
Wonderfully, yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent example of informal learning. That kind of job shadowing is a great example.
Yeah. The question so Irene, I think that you have answered to this question. Executive coaching is doing great thing in informal learning. I have seen a communication training where participants set their own goals and then work with the coach in several ways. So the learning objective is set by the learner rather than the facilitator.
Yep, exactly. Yep. That's it, exactly.
I think that these are questions I have noted.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we are over time at this moment. I want to thank everybody for being here, and you know, I wish you well in the rest of the conference.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for attending at this session. I think that it's a great session with an important experience share with us to address our challenges in vaccination area. Thank you very much, and see you in other session tomorrow. Thank you, and
thank you so much for your help.
Yeah, thank you, Lorelei, and sorry for disturbing you from time to time. Thank you, Fanhei. Yeah, I think that I have pronounced very well your name. I think that it's a great pleasure for me to be part of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Alrighty.